like to start?
My name's Laura Medcalf and I have chosen high level option B because I like to investigate and research different ideas through my HLB book, and I prefer explaining it, and my pieces have a deeper concept than the actual process I went through, which I talk about throughout my pages. My running theme throughout my work is dual nationality, and firstly, my first chosen work of art is called Death by Glamour, and on page 2 I talk about my inspiration, my idea development, and the artist link, who's Robert Rauschenberg. And I have concerns of the Hungary's popular 38% are chain smokers, and this I like to show in elements throughout this piece. And I did a research on page 3 on the manual embroidery, which is the folk art in the Hungarian culture. And on page 12, I show how I get along and how I decided to choose a different medium and experimenting with the lung. And I ended up choosing chalk. And on page 13, I did an artist investigation and an analysis deeply about Robert Rauschenberg and how he inspired me to create this piece of using mixed media. And on page 26, I went through a different process of how I got to this fact of deciding to name my piece Death by Glamour. And in Hungary, a lot of the younger population think that smoking is very glamorous, and I'd like to show with this piece in general that smoking is glamorized. That's why I chose colourful cigarettes. And on page 27 I present the concept behind each idea along this piece. My next piece is called Capturing the Present for the Future, which was a 30-day photo challenge, and the concept behind this piece is I had 30 pieces of images throughout this challenge, which I took, and stones holding the image attached with a helium balloon and pins from the ceiling coming down, and this presents that memory can be kept as an object, as a photograph, but if you don't photograph that memory or happening, then it might disappear, and that is why the stone is holding the helium balloon. But if the image wouldn't be attached and the stone wouldn't be there, which is the object, the balloon would rise up and the pins would make holes in the balloon which will pop, and the memory might disappear if you don't recreate it in a photograph. And for this project, my artist link is a Japanese artist, a photographer called Rinko Kiwachi, who characterizes mostly surreal style and characteristic moments and of everyday life. And I think this 30-day photo challenge really showed my everyday for a month. And I do explain throughout my IWD book the concept and the process I came up with this idea. On page 46, I'm also another concern of my nationality is obesity, and unfortunately 24% of Hungary's population is obese, and people might not know that obesity comes from colorings, from grease, and the food might look attractive, but the material which is made out of just makes not just attractive but also fake. And I'd like to portray this. Firstly, I had an idea of creating an option of creating a scale with an obese and a thinner person, choose a lifestyle and will you be tempted or not. And here's another idea where I decided to do a pop-art style, but then further on my IWB, I went through different processes of idea and concluded onto creating an unusual. I never worked with cardboard, so I used a cardboard for the base and tissue paper and paper mache to recreate a mouth with a heavy red lipstick, again showing fakeness, with the very attractive sweets and food, which links to obesity, and the title of this piece is called Temptation. And my artist link is Klaus Altenberg. On page 51 I've done a artist analysis and the link, how his work of art linked to mine. And also on page 50 I presented some images of my inspirational sweets and how I recreated these sweets with my own idea development and the process I went through. Linking to my other balloon project of capturing the present for the future, I used a BTC 94L box, which is technically a VHS box, of an old recycled VHS box, to make 18 years of my life so far as my most memorable moments, which links to my 30-day photo challenge of capturing the moments. And here I recreate what happened in that year, what was the most amazing happening. And here I show my idea development, and Joseph Cornwell on page 51. I have done a little analysis of him and his work of art linking to mine. And on page 53 I show the process, how it was really challenging to work with this rigid material. And as a background for each box, which was an origami box I created, was wrapped in Clara's Bean by Laura Medcalf books, which were my all-time favourite childhood reads. And also I recreated the objects really personal, and my 18th year isn't in the box or presenting because it shows that I'm going to move away, and I used a recycled tissue box to present that I'm moving away from home and after graduation I have a new start. On page 58 I show that the project of positive and negative space, but firstly I came up with recreating this with a paper medium, and I've shown an analysis and my journey, but then I decided to work with a very unusual material of glue gun and recreate the female figure, and I did an idea development and an artist analysis on page 59 of Rachel Whiteread, and how she recreates objects by using plaster, rubber and resin of everyday objects. But and also I talk about the concept throughout in this page. And on page 73 I show the process and my challenges with the mediums and how I overcome them and how I managed to use this material in an ethereal manner. On page 63, I was really inspired by the Festival of Lights called Diwali in India, and as my running theme throughout is dual nationality, I recreated this concept of creating origami fortune tellers, which is originally a Japanese origami paper art, and Diwali using a recycled paper lamp, and writing in Hindi success, which links to Diwali, and Lakshmi, which is the goddess of Diwali. Also I designed my own Indian patterns, very contemporary, on the lamp to portray this festival. And the lampshade will have is having some speakers of traditional Diwali music, showing sound installation in itself, and on page 69 I present my idea development and the process I went through. It was really challenging that I had to create all the origami fortune tellers one by one and designing it, and have a running theme in a circular motion up the lamp, showing again the Festival of Lights. And also I was inspired, I also talk about on page 69, by artist inspiration called Kirsten Hassenfeld, who really inspired me to use these delicate objects such as rice paper and printing paper. On page 64, I decided to create a composition of my personal dual nationality and create an observational drawing of two very symbolic things, so such as the English rose and the Hungarian Richelieu embroidery. And since Motyó, which is a theme around my works, really inspired me, I used another regional inspiration, which is very similar to this pattern called Kalocsai, and I showed this concept throughout my work. And on page 65 I decided to use different mediums and how I overcome these developments. And as well on page 66 I talk about my own cultural link to this project and what each motif links to me. And on page 67 I have an artist link called Isiana Suhimi, who also embroiders on cartridge paper, and the medium I used was colouring pencil, which I really enjoyed using, which was quite unusual, and I self-embroidered, recreated this tablecloth from observation, such as the roses. And on page 68 I showed my development through my observational drawing, and how I came with the different tones, which I really found challenging to capture the shadow on the roses, and the fact that it was a white rose, but yet it wasn't quite white, it was yellowy grey, and all the different tones I wanted to capture with the colouring pencils was quite challenging. On page 80, I was really inspired by the moss, and I decided to create a dress collection inspired by moss. And on page 80 I show my idea development and using this unusual medium called brusho. And I came up with this idea as I talk about the concept of recreating the femininity and the delicateness of the moss, and this was through my inspirational walks through the forest where I live past nearly. And on page 82 I talk about my artist link, who's called Anna Galworth, who's a graffiti artist but with moss, and she uses natural material. And I did a couple of observational drawings of compositions which inspired me to lead on for this dress collection. And I captured these different textile tones by using the medium called brusho, which I experimented on page 83. On page 85 I talk about my own identity, and with this piece I covered my eyes because I have very Far East eyes, but like my Mongolian blood, and the reason why I did this because it's on the edge between two worlds, and I mixed the two languages of my dual nationality and my identity to recreate this composition. And I really wanted to use a different medium, and I experimented, and I was inspired by an artist called Karen Kimmelich, and on page 85 I talk about her and my inspiration. And on page 89 I talk about my development and why I decided to choose neon and the different fonts I used. On page 87 I would like to, with this piece, I talk about my inspiration of my own femininity and linking to my extended essay of creating the liberty patterns. and my artist link for this project is called Natasha Law, who portrays her work of art very simplistically, and I have I've written a artist analysis about her and the colour schemes on the bottom of the page, which I'm planning to use for this piece. On page 92, I'm explaining the development and the concept and the different ideas I came up with, and making a quick sketch about my idea, and before I chose to write it on canvas. On page 6, I'm talking about my project with Noticing the Unnoticed, again showing my dual nationality and my future, and by this I'd like to capture it by using the manhole covers, which are beautiful in Hungary. So I did a couple of observational drawings on page 7, and my artist link for this project was G&C Finley and John Muse, who also captured the importance and the beauty of manholes. And this piece, I explain on page 8 the development, and the medium I used was metal, and it was really difficult and I overcame these challenges of using acrylic on this, and how I had my flaws, and I also used a 3D material to portray the dirt on the manholes. Page 9, I was really inspired on a visit to the museum in London of the fashion and textiles, and my inspiration grew from the Hammerprint Ltd by Nigel Hardison and Eduardo Palazzi. And with this piece, I developed an idea of creating my concerns, which links to my temptation project with this project I would like to show the natural colours of vegetables, and also this print really captures my healthy lifestyle, and which I'm really keen on. And on page 10 I show a brainstorm of my favourite vegetables and some observational drawings. And on page 11 I talk about the challenges and the process I had, and I really found it difficult to use lino and cut it out, and designing and working from my observational drawings to recreate the lino prints. And my medium is fabric, watercolour and ink.